can't handle it. You can't handle it. Show yourself. Don't wait for them to hold the candle. Time to it's your thing. It's your thing. To be the talker. Meant to be broken. Ooh, yeah. Nothing is funky. Raise the roof to your desire. Ain't nothing is funky. You got to take yourself higher. Doesn't need another minute for you to do your thing. There ain't nothing this funky. There ain't nobody ready for the stuff you bring.
Hello and welcome to a brand new installment of the Purple Notes Unveiled podcast. I'm Richard Cole. And listeners of the program, I know it's been a long time. So you're probably thinking like, man, where'd he go? He only had 3 episodes and he's gone. Nah, just thought I'd dial some things back a little bit, come back a little bit better and stronger. Hopefully you've had a chance to check out Amari Music Talk on YouTube. That's mostly where I've been, but now back on the Purple Notes Unveiled podcast. So definitely welcome back. If you're new to the show, welcome. And let's go ahead and get it started. All right. So this episode, we're going to go into the quantum realm, travel the multiverse, and explore a world in which Purple Rain flopped. Now, I think my inspiration for this episode, Prince has a vast catalog. He's been around many decades. Very few artists get to, be around that long. I mean, not just, in physical form, but just making music consistently. And, while a lot of artists kind of have their classic period or, they have their string of hits during their younger years. As they get older, maybe the quality hasn't there was no lacking in quality, but, as generations change, tastes change, things of that nature, sometimes, it's business is like that sometimes. Music business can, you have your ups and downs and, sometimes you have your slump periods. But I noticed, with this particular fan base that, there seems to be this sort of, vilification of the thing that brought that artist to your radar in the first place. I mean, there's, Beatles fans, they may favor Abbey Road. They may favor the White Album. There's a lot, like in my case, Revolver is my favorite Beatles album. There are people, Rubber Soul is their favorite Beatles album. And, we all acknowledge that, Sgt. Pepper was a great achievement. And yeah, a lot of, hype and myth, that is sort of, latched itself on to the legend of that album over the decades. We're able to kind of separate fact from fiction, and it doesn't lessen what an achievement that album was. The sound innovations, genres for, the next several decades have benefited. Everything from classic rock to hip hop has benefited from those changes, and I think without that success, without that freedom to create such an album, then you don't get to the White Album. You don't get to Abbey Road. But you don't see those fans like I said, vilify. Like, people bring up Sergeant Pepper and they don't go, oh God, oh Sergeant Pepper, oh that album wasn't, oh that album, you don't hear that. You really don't. Um, Bob Dylan, who's had some ups and downs, you don't hear that. It's like, of course, some love the classic, the 60s period when he was the quote unquote voice of the generation, but he had some really strong albums in the 70s. Then he kind of took this turn into kind of like doing Christian music. And, while that divided the fan base, you know, here you have decades later, they drop box sets focusing on that period. The fans embrace it, or they going, well, it's like, well, hey, yeah, that was kind of weird, that was kind of left field, but there's some strong material on it. But when it comes to Prince fans, though, it's just like, oh, I like this era, and no other era matters. Well, I'm sorry, you can't take a human being's existence and just chop it up into pieces. I mean, granted, that's your favorite. The 90s were your favorite, the 2000s were your favorite. That's fine, but none of that would have taken place had it not been for whether he was making his bones on his first few albums, that kind of middle period with Controversy, 1999. You don't get to Purple Rain, and if without the mega success that brought, and granted, yeah, that type of major success, yeah, it does have its downside as well. But I think he was smart enough to be able to distance himself from that. And just because he distanced himself, it wasn't like, oh, this is such a terrible period. It's just artistic license. It's just, his artistic integrity to where, like, yeah, okay, the momentum that it's gaining, yeah, it's bringing some financial reward, but that's not enough. I still want to be able to do the type of music I want to do. And with that success, to be able to take that, build Paisley Park, whether the Vanity label or Paisley Park, the institution, the studio, to be able to have that freedom to go anywhere he wanted after that, and to bring some strong material from Parade to Sign of the Times to, Love Sexy to, having that access to something that could, where he has the freedom to do whatever he did in the 90s, whatever he did in the 2000s. And for me, it's like we're that generation that, me personally, I like to think we grew up with the artist. Now granted, there's some people that was just like with Prince, it was just one of the other musics. It was happening at the time, but then so was Cameo, so was, Guy, so was New Edition, so was this. So they kind of look back at that period with a certain fondness. And it's just like, oh, that's just the memories of our youth. And, and it's personal, just like you holding on to the 90s or the 2000s is personal. So, I don't get like I said, this vilification for it. It's just like, we're in the 40th anniversary of Purple Rain, and yeah, we should celebrate it. Because like I said, if not for that achievement, then like I said, we don't get to Parade. We don't get to Sign of the Times. We don't get to, for me, like I said, I like to think I grew up with the artist. So it was like, cool, once the 80s were over with, and it was kind of like, okay, well, Graffiti Bridge, Graffiti Bridge to me was a great sounding album. The movie, not so much, but like I said, it was still a great album. Diamonds and Pearls, still a great album. But for me, by the time like 93, 94, 95 hit, and the songs that were coming out, even though it was kind of tainted by this battle with Warner Brothers, so that affected how we were getting the material, when we got it. But man, to me, that period, as far as hearing about the songs that he was creating, to me, it was just as exciting as the 80s. It was just, I was like, late 20s going into 30, but feeling like 17, because it was like, man, this is excitement again. It wasn't just like, okay, here's a Graffiti Bridge, here's the Diamonds and Pearls. Okay, well, Symbol album was what it was, but this stuff, and it was forward moving. It wasn't like, oh, he was sounding like the 80s with that stuff. You know, to me, I think he was doing, for me, what I felt was that he was in Prince lane. Yeah, there was still little hip hop elements, and those elements are debatable. But I think overall, when it really started focusing on the songs, when it started to focus on the funk, when it started to kind of go in rock, heavy rock or classic or whatever you want to call it, that was exciting. That was like, man, it was him maturing. Because it's like, yeah, the 80s were the 80s, but yeah, that was him in his earlier 20s. That was me late teens and early 20s. That was a different time. And like I said, going through the journey, emancipation, post emancipation, it was exciting. To me, it was always just as exciting, because it's like, it should be like a friend. And I get it, where some people were younger and it's kind of looking at this elder statesman. And then you look back at when he was younger, and depending on your level of maturity, like, kind of each generation, it's a kind of a thing to where, yeah, you kind of more mature than the previous generation, but then in other areas, not so much, and it's kind of, you've got this figure that you're kind of looking up to, where as we were experiencing it in real time, it's a thing of, it was somebody we were looking up to, but it's kind of that thing, it was kind of like in step, it wasn't like he was the voice of our generation or anything like that. No, I don't think that was the case. But I think it was a thing of, it's like, hey, I'm going in this direction. Who wants to go? It's like, oh, that direction looks kind of cool. Let's go in that direction. And I think, just kind of as he was maturing, as we were maturing, like I said, I like to pride myself on being that type of first generation fan, you know, and not to put down to, wherever you are in your journey, this first generation, just kind of looking back like, kind of like the Stevie Wonder song. I wish those days would come back once more. It's like, yeah, those were fun, exciting times. But, I don't think, I don't want to sacrifice now, despite all of the trials and tribulations that have come over the decades. I wouldn't trade it in now to go back to being there permanently, because I don't, internally, I still feel the same, but, on a spiritual level, and as these outer shells, as we age, that's just part of the journey. But if you still feel great within, if you can still feel great within, then, you know, then like I said, you could look back at that and you can smile, or you could go like, man, I've come through a lot, or I've learned a lot, or I had a lot of fun in those days. But inside, I feel like I'm having just as much fun now. And, and like I say, you don't get to that level of maturity without a certain thing happening. Yeah, maybe some things you could have done without, but you wouldn't be the person you are now had you not gone through this experience or that experience, or had this level of success or this level of failure. You wouldn't be the person you are now. And you just have to kind of be in the now and say, hey, you know, whatever that experience was, it was what it was. But, if you keep moving forward for the positive, cool. If you look back and go, man, that was rough, but I choose to stay in the positive. So I'm going to take everything I've learned. This is here. This is now. This is what I'm dealing with. Let's keep moving forward because it's not too late. So again, I don't get this vilification for I don't get this vilification for Purple Rain at all. You know, like I said, this is the 40th anniversary, and we should definitely celebrate it. So, in a roundabout way, that was, my inspiration for this particular topic. And I'm going to cover as many aspects of this as I can, starting with its history and significance, both the film and the movie. I mean, both the film and the album. The album was released June 25th, 1984. It doesn't feel like that. I don't know why I felt like I bought the album later. Um, but, that summer of 84. I think I remember, I don't know. If I remember correctly, I think I got Ice Cream Castles first and then the Purple Rain album. I can't remember. I have to kind of really reflect on those days. But the album came out June 25th, 1984. The film came out July 27th, 1984. The film had a budget of $7 million. Its box office, I think domestically was like 65 to 68 million. I think it might have grossed 70 million worldwide. But the film, when we first heard about him making a film, like right around 83, to me, that was like the most exciting time for me as a Prince fan, because it was like we've come through like 1982, from late summer of 1982 until the summer of 83. There was the Times. What time is it? There was Vanity Six album, 1999, and to me, it was like sort of the epitome of this like underground, this kind of like thing. It's like, yeah, those records were successful. They got radio play. They were major R&B hits. And with the case of 1999, it was slow to get there, but it was crossing over. By 83, allowing MTV allowing black artists on, with Michael Jackson being first, Prince possibly second. Then there was the beginning of where those songs were crossing over. But that 1999, as far as mainstream, as far as pop, it was struggling. Us in R&B, we embraced it. The black charts embraced it. And that was kind of the status quo up until, like I said, 83. And, Little Red Corvette kind of caused people to kind of go back and say, oh, let's check out this 1999, this album. And while that album had been out so long, it did pick up momentum, but it didn't pick up enough momentum for, Warner Brothers to have any major confidence in what Prince was doing going forward. But it was contract renegotiation time, and, probably shout out to, who Prince had as management. Prince had his demands, and management was able to negotiate and, have those demands realized. Making a motion picture was one of them. But we never really thought like it was going to be this major success. I think it would have been, my personal thinking was that it would be something as a Prince fan that I would enjoy. It would be deep. It would be kind of, what is this going to be? Who's in it? Like, oh, at first Vanity Six is in it. Like, the Time is in it. And it's like, oh, okay, so it's going to be like this cool little thing. And, it'll probably do what it does in the theaters. And, we'll buy the album, and, maybe the album will kind of get a little bit more success than 1999. But maybe anybody outside of Prince didn't realize that this thing was going to be as major as it was. Like I said, 70 million worldwide, which in those days, that's kind of the equivalent of, say, a movie with a $20 budget. Well, let's put it this way. The success of Purple Rain is the equivalent of success to what, say, a Tyler Perry movie would be, given, that Tyler Perry makes his movies depending on what year, but on average, say 7 to 20 million, and they make a few 100 million in the box office. So they make back its budget plus the marketing, and the rest is money in your pocket at that point. That's what the equivalent of Purple Rain success money wise in those days, adjusting for inflation. Um, but it was a risk. It was a gamble. And something magical happened in July of 1984 that this thing became, the it was like one of the best rock films since like A Hard Day's Night. Um, that achievement, number one album, number one single, number one movie. Nothing had been done like that since then. And I mean, granted, there's people that's going to argue, well, what about Talking Heads making sense? That was a great concert. That was a great rock movie. And um, what else was around there? There was some other rock films, but like Stop Making Sense. That was more like a concert film, or The Song Remains the Same, Led Zeppelin. That's a concert film. To which years later, Sign of the Times gets mentioned in the same breath as those films. But as far as like this sort of quasi fictional, loosely based on real people type of a film with a plot and a story, beginning, a middle, and an end, mixed in with some great music. Yeah, nothing had been done like that since A Hard Day's Night. With the Beatles. But again, this was a major, major risk, major risk, and we all know what came after that. There was a major tour. This was sort of, now we're getting, speaking of Beatles, this is Prince's equivalent to Beatlemania, to where it's like every household knows who he is. Even households that never would have thought of buying a Prince record or buying, anything that's not, hair metal or Black Sabbath or Kiss or Van Halen or something like that. Now they're like, oh, let's check out this Prince guy, this Purple Rain. Let's check that out. You know, um, Girls screaming where, next, by the time Madonna comes, then they stop screaming at Prince and going to go scream at Madonna, or, whoever's the next big thing that, the so-called powers that be decide, oh, that's going to be the next big thing. And, not think of it in terms of, oh, I'm going to get into this artist because they're a great artist and explore their catalog, whether they have hits or not. you know. But like I said, we did not realize how important this was. But again, we all know what came after. So he rebelled against that success with Around the World in a Day, made a stronger album with Parade, but depending on who you talk to, a lesser film, Under the Cherry Moon. Then comes Sign of the Times, the building of the Paisley Park facility with all that Purple Rain profit. That was a $10 million facility. If he had, just off of his record sales, and if Purple Rain, I think probably with the way the Purple Rain album sold, I think it still probably would have been possible for him to do that. But like I said, after you make back your 7 million, and then the marketing for that, maybe in those days, who knows, maybe 2 million roughly in those days for your marketing. By the time those ticket sales paid that off, everything was money in everybody else's pocket. Money in Prince's pocket, money in Warner Brothers' pocket. So who knows? Like I said, if it was successful, if the album was successful and maybe not the film, who knows? But yeah, I mean, like I said, it opened all those doors to get to the point whenever you stepped in to listen to Prince. So, like if Diamonds and Pearls was your gateway, Purple Rain was the door that opened that up to make that possible. If, the 90s or musicology or 3121 is your gateway, then Purple Rain was the major success that kept his name in as many households to reach your radar. Um, but going back to pre Purple Rain, you had success like, you had his first album, For You, um, which, 19, even though he was claiming, 17 at the time, and the, good PR stunt, like making him a lot younger. Because I think Shuggy Otis, by the time I think he was 19, had, oh God, I'm drawing a blank on the album. Information, Inspiration. Oh, let's see. It'll come to me in a moment. But that album, and while that album wasn't a major success, that was one of the youngest people at the time to write, produce, play all the instruments, write all the songs on the album, of which that album, Strawberry Letter 23, the Brothers Johnson's cover of that song was a major success. But For You is kind of on that level, somebody that's well under 21, that's writing, producing, playing all the instruments on the record. That's a major achievement. But given that that's his rookie album, it went over budget. The songs weren't major hits. Soft and Wet was one. I mean, I think it got to what, 17 on the charts, I think. But I remember like being 12 and not really being aware of that record. I remember hearing it. It was on the radio. I think like by summer of 78, I'm hearing it, but like the DJ was playing it in that block of songs, that commercial free block of songs where, it's just flowing from one song to the next. And it's like, man, that's a nice track. Who is that? And never get to hear who that artist was. And, granted, the next album was more successful. He did have a major pop, maybe barely top 10 hit with I Want to Be Your Lover. But, as far as the R&B charts, that track was very successful. And that album put him on the map. Then he did a complete left turn with Dirty Mind. And then that solidified the type of artist that we're getting. This ain't just some dude just making R&B. No, this dude is going to be an artist like Sly Stone. He's going to be an artist like Jimi Hendrix. He's got the swag of the Rolling Stones. He's got the chops of Santana. Kind of on that genius level like Stevie. He was now being mentioned in that vein instead of just like, oh, he's just some, young disco Smokey Robinson Bee Gees wannabe, or Michael Jackson wannabe. This is, Dirty Mind was the one that said, no, he's his own artist, and this dude is going to be in the game for a while. But, those are momentum. Those are success stories. Every artist has that, where it's like they start here and then each album gets better and better and better, or it goes to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. And then we get to Purple Rain. Now, this isn't my original copy. My original copy was so well worn that I ended up like a former coworker gave him that record to decorate his music room, like, put all these album covers up on the wall and, the albums on the wall or something like that. But I got the 180-gram vinyl pressing. I think this was from 2015, this pressing. And then the CD, I kind of at one point just had gotten rid of my original Prince CDs because I was just so dissatisfied with the sound quality, to where now, we're starting to get those things remastered slowly. Um, I got the Sony reissues of the classic Warner Brothers era catalog. Um, some gaps that I ended up having with the later material. And while those aren't remastered, um, they do have to conform to the mastering standards of Sony. So the quality is a little bit better. Like I said, looking forward to eventually having remasters of things that we don't already have yet. Um, and then there's this remaster of Purple Rain. Um, I may revisit this again and talk about it. But what would have happened if all of this flopped? Like what if the album flopped? Or what if the album and the movie flopped? So let's look at what if the movie flopped and the album succeeded. So, like I said, with the major success of Purple Rain, the movie, the album, the tour, and I think just that combination of success, that avalanche of success and adulation. And then meanwhile, now, you get to that level of fame, you got people coming at you from all directions, from the type of people that Cat Williams talks about to, people just want to feed off your energy. You don't know who your friends are anymore. You don't, things have changed. You got people like, oh, okay, now you're the star now. Okay, you don't have to ride the bus with the band anymore. No, you get your own bus, or, to maintain now you're at this level to where you don't have just the band. You got a whole bunch of new employees now because now you're at that level of success. You have to maintain it. And now you can't be the cool, hey, we cool now. It's kind of like, okay, I'm giving you an order and that order needs to be executed, and that's that fine line. You can't be as cool as you want to be anymore. You can't be as friendly as you want to be anymore. And I'm sure all of that was weighing in, and like what choices? It's like, okay, I like being at this level of success for the money that it brings. And with the money that it brings, the type of freedom I can have in this area. But all these other areas are becoming stifling. So he creates Around in the World in a Day as sort of as a rebellion, or as Questlove would say, that one self-sabotaging album, because it's like you at this level of success and it's like, well, instead of doing Purple Rain 2 or 1999 2, I got to do something so far to the left that only my deepest, truest fans are going to keep up with it. And that was Around the World in a Day. But what if Purple Rain flopped? Then, if the film flopped, if the film and the album flopped, then Around the World in a Day would be a different album. In the case of, okay, this flopped. Now you got the record company on your back because you either owe them money now or they're at this thing like, okay, well, you weren't the major success we thought you would be. You're a creative person, you wrote some great songs, you've had a few hits, but we want your momentum to keep going. So what happens? So it's kind of like, is it flop? Does he have to honor the contract now? Like, okay, well, yeah, this next album better be the hit. So Around the World in a Day, as we know it, would be a different album. Like maybe some of the songs, because those songs were being developed as Purple Rain was getting ready to come out, meaning that between the time that he was finishing the songs for that album and writing for The Time and Apollonia 6 and Sheila E. The Family was just, that was the beginning stages of that project. Um, I think you were just getting Maserati signed to Paisley Park. So I guess there was that Paisley had that Vanity deal, label deal with Paisley Park. So you had the Family, you had Maserati coming into the fold. Meanwhile, Morris left, Jesse left, and what if on top of all of that, you got this mounting pressure of this film that $7 million was spent and an album that didn't do as well. I think it still would have been successful. The album still would have gone #1. He would have had some that built off the crossover success of, say, Little Red Corvette, but I don't think it would have sold in the tens of millions. I don't think. I think it would have done, probably double platinum, maybe triple platinum, which would have been cool. Maybe 4 million, or it could have been on that wave still. But I think the film, the album. I think if you take one piece out, that whole structure just kind of falls apart. But yeah, Around the World Today would have been different because it would have been like, okay, now do I take Screams of Passion and keep that for myself? Do I take this song, keep it for myself? Man, I was going to give Andre Dance Electric, but man, I need that pressure. I need that hit. I need to take that back and write him something else. So the way that we hear Around the World Today would have been different, or it may not have even been. Maybe he would have scrapped the whole concept of Around the World Today, meaning like, okay, what songs do you cherry pick from that album that would still be good? But like I said, that pressure to have a hit is kind of like, now, how does, if I take Screams of Passion back, how does that fit? Or do I put High Fashion on? Or Mutiny? Or, does a whole nother album kind of go into this Black Album style mode? Meaning like there's this attitude like, oh, I'm not funky anymore, or, oh, I'm told I can't hang with the rock cats. Oh, let me see what we can do with that. So, yeah, definitely Around the World in a Day would have been a completely different album. And that would have affected the trajectory of everything moving forward. Because with no confidence with a non-successful film, then there's no budget for Around the World Today. Warner Brothers isn't going to sign that check. So there'd be, the Parade album as you know it either wouldn't exist, or that would be a completely different album. Or it might have jumped from Dance Electric, that I say that because that's my imaginary album title. So like if Around the World Today never existed, then you would have had like the Dance Electric album, and then maybe from in '85, and then from there, maybe something would have come out in '86, or you would have gotten signed to the Times in '86. Who knows? Like I said, it's something to think about. It's definitely something to think about. So along those lines, I think it would have been more of an attempt to be different creatively than to distance himself from the myth and the hype of what Purple Rain eventually came out to be. So the motivation where Around the World in a Day was meant to rebel against the success of Purple Rain. Take away that success, then it flips. So there's this pressure to come up with not necessarily a commercial album, but I think that, like I said, with something like a Dance Electric, if he kept that to himself, how would that have gone? Screams of Passion, keeping that to himself. How would have gone? Or the one thing to think about, because it's when I hear things like about, say imaginary Beatles reunions, how, or imagine if the Beatles never broke up. And it's kind of like what fans do, and I've done it too, where you take um, cherry pick whatever songs from the solo albums and you make a little playlist and say, if the Beatles never broke up, this album would have had those songs on it. But one thing we never consider is that sort of unknown factor that, okay, like I said, Purple Rain became this major success, and therefore it influenced the trajectory of everything that was to come. Like the next album led to decisions that informed the next album. And then those decisions, whatever was going on, led to the formation or the songs that became part of this album. So if you flip that, then what else in the universe would you come up with? So if you flip that success of Purple Rain, saying that if it flopped, and then there was this other type of pressure. So instead of rebelling against success, then you're making artistic decisions on another level. What kind of songs would he have come up with at that point? So if you think about, say, the stuff on Parade never would have come to fruition if he was influenced by something else. If he was doing something, another project that had nothing to do with an Under the Cherry Moon film. Like I said, the songs for Around the World in a Day, a lot of those are already in circulation just prior to the film's release. So that obviously would have still existed. And some of that still would have ended up on whatever, say, like I said, Around the World in a Day would have been a different concept of an album. Or if he created an entirely different album altogether. And in that universe, we're looking at like, man, I wonder what that Around the World in a Day album sounds like. Because he was working on that. Then he shelved it because Purple Rain flopped. And then he went and came out with this album. So, what songs, what type of songs would he have come up with? Not to say that he wouldn't have or they wouldn't have been great, but, imagine a world where there's this Prince song that we know nothing about because it only exists in that particular universe. Man, that would be heavy. But again, there would have been more of an attempt to define himself creatively than to really come up with an album that was designed to distance himself from that sort of illusion of that sort of Elvis, Beatles, Michael Jackson style of success that, in the hands of a weaker person would have broken them a lot sooner. The tour would have been different. And I think because the way the Purple Rain tour became so stagnant, because it was designed to be like, okay, let's entertain these people, like I said, that have never bought a Prince record, or they never bought an R&B record, or they never bought a record from a young black person like that before, or whatever. You had to do those same songs. And a lot of times those performances were meant to mimic the performances you saw in the film. So I think that if he had still toured, which would have helped the success of the album, I think that that tour would have been different because it would have been more diverse. I think it would have been more kind of like what we got with, say, the tours prior to the Purple Rain tour, and definitely the way he toured after Purple Rain. I think we would have gotten some kind of combination of that, or it would have gone in a different direction, which, like I said, would have influenced different songs, like I said, that only exist in a universe where things turned out differently with Purple Rain. And I already discussed how different Parade or Sign of the Times would be, whether those albums would exist, whether only in title, or certain song choices, songs out of the ether that would have become hits instead of the hits that we're familiar with. So definitely different albums would have emerged. Um, and then how would the trajectory of his career and mindset as an artist, how that would have been affected? So, like I said, one possibility, what if, okay, he was in the midst of compiling around the world in a day, album flops, movie flops. Then it's like, okay, I'm gonna put this on the shelf, I'm gonna put this in the vault, and I'm gonna wipe the slate clean, start from scratch, and come up with something totally new, totally different. Um, would he have come up with an album, and just an album, that would have been a monster success? That still would have gotten him there, but maybe not as much pressure, or it would have influenced the next couple of albums ahead to where, yeah, that album was a success, but his mindset is already on the next one or two albums anyway. That it wouldn't have been the pressure to rebel against that success. It's just like, okay, let's do this album, let's get this tour out the way, and let's get ready to drop this album so I can go ahead and work on the third, fourth, fifth album that's ahead of what I'm already two steps ahead on anyway. Um, would he have wanted out of his contract? So would we've seen that sort of tug of war with Warner Brothers, kind of starting with Sign of the Times. We've seen that play out in the 90s. That freedom, ownership that became his mission statement for the rest of his career after that. But, what if this was the flashpoint in 84, 85, to where either he blames them and wants out of his contract, or what if Warner Brothers decides to drop it? Then what kind of artist would we have if either one of those things? My personal theory, I think that he would have ended up being kind of more of a Frank Zappa type of artist, in the way that there's no Paisley Park. He's scaling everything back. He's scaling it all back. Whether it's the family, whether it's Sheila E., Jill Jones, Eric Leeds, I think that they would have been brought kind of more into the fold. Kind of like when you get a Frank Zappa album, there's a certain cast of characters. And what I mean by that, like, you have, like, there's different band members, that lends itself to a particular project. Like the whole overnight sensation, apostrophe period. You had, with Frank Zappa, you had George Duke on the keyboards, musicians of that type. I think earlier, prior to that, you had Flo and Eddie. They were the standouts on particular, Frank Zappa albums, excuse me, and tours. So I think you would, and later, I think in the 80s, you had Steve Vai, fantastic guitar player, into the fold, but it's still Frank Zappa. So it wouldn't have been this thing of, here's this protege album, here's that protege album. I think he would have been in a financial position, because at this point, like I said, there's no Paisley Park. There's no $10 million because, your movie flopped. And granted, maybe the album would have been successful, but if it only sold, 10 million, I mean, like if it only sold 3 million or something like that, and he was barely getting a quarter per record, there's no building of Paisley Park at that point. So, as an artist, like I said, you dialing it back. And like I said, I think that they just would have been brought into the fold, and I think he would have been more independent, like Frank Zappa. And that's the thing, let's forget about hits. Let's forget about what Billboard says. Let's forget about how many billions of streams Spotify you get and all of that. Forget all of that. You're a success upon creation. And, Frank Zappa's had a wide, long, diverse career, you know, the majority of it as an independent, calling his own shots, owning his own masters, the recording studio in the house, state of the art recording studio in the house, in, little crib out in Laurel Canyon, just the studio. And I don't know where his vault was. I don't know if that was in the house too, if he had like a wing built to accommodate that. But however Frank stored his vault, I think that's, eventually how Prince would have stored his vault. I think, it would have been like that. And he would have been more independent. He would have had ownership from day, from post Purple Rain on. There would have been that ownership. And then maybe be in a position to get those classic masters back a lot sooner without painting the slave on the face and changing the name or anything like that. I know that's just my personal theory. So, not as a superstar, but I think he would have survived as a more independent artist with a niche following because, hey, you own your product, you control your distribution, so you making $7 per album instead of a quarter. Or, I think Michael Jackson, by Thriller had negotiated up to like $1.50 per record at that point, which was pretty big compared to what any artist, regardless, probably even Whitney Houston, or even not lesser artist, but a lot of artists you enjoy wasn't getting $1.50 per record. And really a quarter would have been too much to ask in that negotiation table. They would have been like, quarter per record? Are you crazy? We're not getting, go sign with somebody else. We get the quarter. So, very few people got those type of royalty points on that. So, but that being said, like I said, he would have, been a niche artist. I think he would have stayed on that level. Like, we always had enjoyed it, between say Dirty Mind and 1999. I think, those records would have been at least that successful. And being an independent niche artist like that, like I said, he would have been able to come out with anything he wanted to. There'd be nobody to challenge him, nobody to say, oh, well, we can't put that out. They just, it's like the heavy lifting's been done. He's recorded the album. It's just, hey, help me get this into a store at this point. And like I said, definitely owning his masters from, that would have been, like I said, there wouldn't have been, the battle would have been a lot smaller because like I said, if it stopped at the level of success stopped at whatever, 1999, or again, if Purple Rain only sold 2 million, 3 million, maybe even 4 million copies or whatever, then it would have been easier to negotiate getting those masters back because, it's on the strength of Purple Rain that battle had gone on for so long, or the fact that, post 1995, he owned every master after that, and sorry to say, folks, it's kind of like, we know you like Prince on that level, but are you on that level with, say, Stevie Wonder? Like whenever Stevie drops a new album, do you think that's the greatest masterpiece? I mean, the Stevie Wonder, of course, is going to be great, but it's that classic material from the 70s. He had a bunch of hits in the 60s for sure. There's no denying that. Even if the 70s never existed for Stevie, he would have been remembered just for, Signed, Sealed, Delivered, Uptight, My Sherry. he would have been remembered just off of that alone. Those were some great records. For Once in My Life, that was a big hit. But we always go back to that 70s period. We go back because that's the classic period. That's your money period. There's no, you know, there's no tour, for, in the case of Prince, there's no tour where you can go on tour and not play your hits and everybody embrace it. Had it not been for Purple Rain, it doesn't work like that. It's that success that gave him the confidence to keep moving forward. The money, like I said, even though he could have made more if he owned the masters, the Purple Rain at that point, but at that time, the money he was getting for Purple Rain, both the film, the record, that was still money you could not ignore. And it allowed him to do so many great things. So many great things. But you don't, that's the thing. It's like, great, you love the new stuff, and that's good. Music is subjective. But, we got to stop this, crapping on the old days, and us first generation stuff. We got to stop stepping on these young folks too. Because, it's like, look, regardless of what our feelings are about the estate, and I don't know, what the family members are getting, but I think the ones that, either the ones that have sold their shares, for the quick money, and that was in the tens of millions, and they now get to live their best life and they don't have to really bother about certain decisions or be pressured about certain decisions. They wanted their money now and they cashed in. Or the ones that's like, yeah, they cashed in, but they hold on to a percentage, so that way that long money that starts coming in, then they're still getting a little something, so say if the 10 million, the 20 million, whatever they got, either that got spent or that's set up, or, like I said, these are decisions that we don't think about, we just sit here and play armchair quarterback like, oh, this should happen, that should happen. But, just forget about all of that for a minute. Forget about what our feelings are. That's money that's on the table. And, it's kind of selfish for us to think that, okay, well, we bought this record, we bought this CD, we bought this cassette, we watched the video, we bought the movie ticket, we bought the DVD, we bought the VHS. And because we bought that at that particular moment in time, to mentally or emotionally say, screw that period. It's like, nah, you affected the money that's on the table. And, the whole thing about what Prince would have wanted when he was here, there's none of us, I don't care who you are. I don't care what platform you're on. I don't care if you met Prince. I don't care if you, for 2 minutes, compared to people that have worked with him day and night or lived with him day and night, compared to those people are probably the only ones qualified to say, I think this is what he would have wanted. But because he didn't let everybody in and they were that close, none of us are qualified. None of us are qualified to make those type of decisions. But it is selfish for us because, like I said, we bought that record, we bought that movie ticket, we bought this, we bought that, we bought that DVD, we bought that Blu-ray, we bought that album, cassette, CD, whatever, that it's like we own it and it's given us years of enjoyment, or it's comforted us in the deepest, darkest times of your existence. It's selfish for us to comment on the totality of that man's career and chop it up and divide it up. I'm sorry. Like I said, us first generation folks, we got to stop crapping on the younger folks for whenever period they came in. They're enjoying it. That's this point forward. Us first generation folks, there's a time we're not going to be here anymore, physically on this plane. And for Prince's relatives, his nieces, his nephews, those generations to come, they got to eat. They got to eat. And like I said, regardless of what we feel about the estate, who's running it, that's a different topic of conversation. But as long as those family members are getting something, and then, like I said, there's those this like, he didn't speak to them when they were. Ain't no family perfect. No family's perfect. If you got that Brady Bunch type of existence, good on you. If you've done the best that you absolutely could, good on you. But this is just music. This is just the greatest funk rock genre busting artist in the world, but he's still a human being. We have no right to comment on, like I say, that chopping it up and holding on to it. I don't want to go back to high school. nah, it was a drag enough the first time. Yeah, I don't want to go back. I like being a grown adult, and living life exciting, not to say that it, didn't have some fun moments then too, but that's the thing, when you keep harping back on something like you want to go back there permanently, then something's lacking to where you can't enjoy life now. But then that's on you to figure out. You have to take responsibility for your existence. But like I say, we got to stop all this division. This is the only fan base I've seen. And there's other fan bases, and they do have strong comments about certain things. But at the end of the day, they'll, if they're waiting for something to come out, then the way that they initially hear it, it may put them off. But, the minute that project drops, they're like, oh, wow, this is great. It may not have been what I've wanted, or, yeah, this may not be the best release that they've done, but wow, this is better than what I thought it would be. They embrace it. Like I say, regardless, they got their, folks got their favorite album. They got their favorite era of a certain artist, but they don't beef with each other. They don't, yeah, I like this album, because it's not like that decade, and it's not like, that, this little backhanded bullshit with, like trying to tell you what you like sucks. It's like you dealing from that deck, you suck. That's just it. It's one man, it's the journey, and it's okay. Like I say, I'm not a fan of the Planet Earth album, but I do listen to it from time to time. And there are songs that I do enjoy listening to it. But, outside of the good natured ribbing, but I don't do that every episode. I don't get on here every episode and say, hey, let's talk about Purple Rain, because it's not Planet Earth, that crappy album. You don't hear that. You don't hear that. And if I have somebody on the show that says that they absolutely love the Planet Earth album, let's discuss it. Let's talk about it. Let's find out about what you like about it. Let's find out like what you like. And maybe that'll, if not say myself, then whoever's listening is like, oh, what's this Planet Earth album all about? Well, you know what? I'm going to go check it out. And they check it out, and it's the best thing they've ever heard. And that leads them into getting into whatever, 3121, musicology, where they go all the way back to For You. And they decide, like, okay, they may cherry pick some albums, or they may eventually want to get the whole catalog. That's the deck we need to deal with. That's how we need to roll as a community. Let's be this community. So, I know I think originally this was going to be a Patreon exclusive. Going to change this to an early access. I was going to do like a companion piece and put it on YouTube, but I think now, having gone through the flow of this discussion, I think that what I want to do is go ahead and make this, like I said, early access, and let's get YouTube, and let's get as many people to check this out as possible. Like I said, because it's something to think about. It's definitely something to think about. But that's it. What if Purple Rain flopped? where would Prince be? So, like I said, I hope it gives you something to think about. Again, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for, checking out the tunes. Got some new stuff coming. If you haven't seen on social media, little early first look or first listen to the track Hold On that's going to be on the Reset EP. Definitely check it out. It's a work in progress, so everything sounds a little weird right now, but it's still funky. But can't wait to finish that and get that out to you. But again, you know, become a Patreon supporter. 7 day free trial on the $1 tier. So dip your toe in, and if you like it, just only costs you $1 a month to do that. Some interesting perks even on that level. Early access, bonus content. Just check it out. YouTube, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Hope you checked out the bar that I'm going to put down on the bottom. That's all the social media contact there. So, let's try to be a fun community like these other fan bases. Like I said, they got their strong opinions too, but you don't see them putting down other fans on there. Not what I've seen. Like everybody's least favorite is somebody's favorite. And when they post it on their social media, like, I love this album, and all the comments, oh yeah, great album. Or, you know what? I've never heard this album before. Let me check it out. So that's how we need to start rolling as Prince fans. So until then, create your day, create your life. See you next episode. Bonus content for Patreon coming up next. YouTube, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next whatever. This is Purple Notes Unveiled podcast. I'm Richard Cole. Peace.
Higher, baby.